Good morning and welcome to the Herald's special Rugby World Cup video coverage. I'm delighted I'm not as delighted as David Barnes is to be in the south of France. I'm still stuck in the west coast of Glasgow, west coast of Glasgow, west coast of Scotland. But David Barnes is out there in France and also been providing brilliant written coverage along with Alistair across the tournament and Stuart. David, how is it? How's the south of France treating you?
It's good. I'm going to try and put a complaint in early. We had to get up at 6 o'clock this morning to get to the press conference, so that was really tough for us. It was probably the first time that I didn't, open the curtains to glorious sunshine. But yeah, it's great. It's the weather's not quite as warm as it has been. Was at the start of the tournament. But listen, I've learned from phone calls home that you can't really complain too much about 5 weeks in the south of France. So I'm just gonna. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, and the rugby's beginning to hot up. It's been quite a long 2 weeks, between the first game, from a Scottish perspective, certainly between the first game and the second one. So, as a journalist, it's quite hard to try and keep that going. The players, the previous game's gone; they're not quite focused in the first one. So, I'm quite looking forward to the next couple of days, and then Sunday, obviously, a game against Tonga, which Scotland should win, but it could be interesting.
Yeah, so also you're an hour ahead over there, so it's approaching midday in France. But the reason you were up incredibly early this morning is because Scotland had their team announcement at 7:30 UK time, 8:30 French time. Incredibly early to do such a thing. Poor journalists having to go up at that time to learn the squad. But that's obviously because the Scotland's second game in the Rugby World Cup is on Sunday against Tonga. We'll go through Gregor Townsend's team announcement. There was 4 changes in total. We'll ask you to kind of go through them in a minute, David. We'll just run through the team from the backs into the forwards. So we've got Blair Kinghorn as a fullback. You've got Kyle Steyn on the wing with Duhan, Van der Merwe and Harris and Tipoloto as the centres. Finn Russell, fly half, and Ben White continues at scrum half. The forwards, it's Sutherland, Turner, Ferguson, Gray, Cummings, Ritchie, Darg and Dempsey. 4 changes from Townsend. David, I mean, what do you make of those changes? Do any of them catch your eye in particular? Surprised there's not more? Surprised there's been as many as 4?
I thought he might. I didn't think he would make that many changes, so it's probably about par for the course. More not because I've got any great knowledge of what goes on inside Gregor Townsend's head. He's been quite open about the fact that the way the games are spread out. They had a big game against South Africa that they needed to be at their best. Then the 2 weeks off to recover. Then they play Tonga, and then they have Romania with the best will and with greatest respect to Romania. That's the game that they really shouldn't be under too much pressure for. So that's, I think, will be in Gregor's head, is the game that they rest more of the frontliners and then bring them back for which is likely to be a do or die game against Ireland. I think if they hadn't, a lot of these guys, if they hadn't played this week and you rest against Romania, that's a month between 2 games, and there's always a risk of injury. But then the flip side is, if you play a month between 2 games, do you come into a bit rusty? So 4 seems a bit par for the course. I think Kyle Steyn probably comes in on merit. He played he played well during the Six Nations when Darcy Gray was injured. He scored a couple of tries against France, and he was probably a bit unlucky to miss out. So I don't think that's, I think probably Darcy's still ahead of Kyle in terms of the pecking order, but I think that's much of a muchness. It's a merit call. Chris Harris is a British Lion. I mean, the thing that caught my eye is we picked presumably our best team to play South Africa, and this team they've mixed up has brought 2 British Lions and Chris Harris and Rory Sutherland into the squad. So that kind of shows that we've got a bit more depth than we had before. Chris Harris is more of a defensive player than Hugh Jones, who he's replaced, and I think that's because they'll watch Tonga against Ireland, and Tonga, they play a pretty unstructured game, and they threw everything at Ireland in that first half, and Ireland struggled to cope with it. So I think it's probably going to be more about containment. They're not necessarily as conditioned and as capable of lasting the whole game. So Harris is there to just kind of keep, and they've spoken about this, just keep the focus, keep things disciplined for the first half, and then hope the second half they pull away. And then in the pack, Scott Cummings coming in, he's just a good player that probably deserves his chance. So I don't think there's any huge shocks in there. I mean, it's quite interesting. They've picked quite a strong bench. There's guys that'll come in there. Darcy Graham, as a real eye catcher. Hugh Jones will come off the bench, and they'll hope once the game's broken up in the second half, these guys will start running in a few tries. And I think that's probably the basic plan. Keep it controlled. Try and wear Tonga down in the first half, and then after the break, hopefully get a score, because they do need to kind of rack up a few points, because it may well become a points race with Ireland. for the qualification spot to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, completely.
That was a very long answer. Sorry about
that. Listen, your knowledge is it's unrivaled, David. That's why you're on here, and that's why we love to listen to you. So that's what it's all about. I do say, guys, obviously we haven't been on for 2 weeks because there's been no game. So we are planning to do these videos. We'll do one after the squad announcement. We'll do one live from the stadium before every game, and we'll do kind of a recap video on the day after the game. So if you do like this, stay tuned. We will start to promote it more this week as we get our head around things. And if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter on the Herald's channel, do give us a like, hit the like button. That does help us get people watching these videos. We do enjoy doing them. Kyle Steyn, he's one I'm excited about being back in the team. He's got a really good try record, as does Darcy Graham, who comes in to replace him. So I'm excited about that. Scoring points will be important, David, because it could well come down to points. If Scotland beat Ireland in that kind of do or die game.
Yeah, absolutely will do. And it's interesting. Before we came on, we were discussing Brad Moore, who's the attack coach, who you'd think would be a guy that's quite big on scoring points. Given that's his job title, was asked about that during the week, and his line was, that we need to concentrate on doing our things well, and the tries will come after that. We're not going to change our game. I can see where he's coming from, but the bottom line is, Scotland need the points, but because it could come down to that for qualification. They also need it for their own kind of sense of purpose. They're a team. They pride themselves on being a team that play attacking rugby, that score tries. It's almost like the Man United team of the 90s. You score 3, we score 4. That's their attitude. They didn't score a try against South Africa, which was the first time in about 2 years. So it's important from a practical sense, but I think it's also important just because they want to kind of put out there that a World Cup, they want to show what they're about. Sam Skinner, who's the replacement second row, said during the week, we want to say we're here. They've been here for 2 weeks, and nobody's talking about them. So it's important psychologically and just in terms of the practical sense, and getting making sure they're in a good position to qualify.
No, completely. Just on Brad's comments, and then Blair Kinghorn kind of echoed the same sentiment. Do you think it's a case of just not getting ahead of themselves and keeping optimism down, and not getting carried away ahead of the game and not putting too much pressure upon themselves?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, part of the reason they score a lot of tries is that they're very good at building through phases. I think that, they don't want to kind of, and we see it in football, we see it in other sports, if you're chasing the game, you start chasing the game too early, you leave yourself exposed at the back. And you saw that, and I think they saw Ireland, that happened with Ireland. Ireland didn't really take control of the game early on, and, it took them a while to get going. So I kind of see where they're coming from in that sense. So I think it's kind of partly trying to, not trying to kind of be respectful of the opposition, I suppose, one thing, and they should be. I mean, that's a good Tongan side, but also just that they need to kind of, the edge they have on Tonga is that they can play, they've got a better structured game, and if they do that, they stick to that, then the chances will come. I think it's the logic there.
Yeah. I watched the first game of Tonga against Ireland. It was also remembered for Johnny Sexton breaking Ronan Agara's record, and he done it in some style as well. You expect, everyone knew ahead of the tournament that Sexton would claim that record during a time in France. So I think most people would have expected it to come through his boot, not capping off a lovely try against Tonga. Tonga put up a good fight. I thought, first 15 minutes they were really good, and then they had that period of pressure towards the end of the first half. Was it Peter O'Mahony off the top of my head who got binned? And they didn't really take advantage of that man, having that extra man, did they? They didn't really get enough points on the scoring, and Ireland ran out, 59-16 winners. I mean, what do you expect from this Tonga side? Who are the players that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, the big difference, Scotland played Tonga 2 years ago in a November test, but it was played outside the international window, so it meant, a lot of the guys who are based in England and France on both sides weren't available. Scotland beat them 60-odd, 16, I can't remember the exact score, but something like that. It'll be a very different team this time because the Tonga, who are a smaller nation, have got all their guys back. It was going to hit them more. But there's also been this rule change, which means that people of Tongan descent, if you're Tongan born or your parents were, or your grandparents, and they've played for New Zealand in the past, that they were an All Black and that they were never going to play for Tonga. That rule changed in that if you have a 3-year stand-down period, you can move back and play for your original country. Now, Scotland took advantage of that with Jack Dempsey, but it was really designed for countries like Tonga, who have traditionally lost players to New Zealand and Australia and never seen them back. So there's a whole load of those guys back. There's a guy called Charles Piatow. I keep on pronouncing his name wrongly, but he's a fullback, played down at Bristol. And at one time, he was the highest paid rugby player in the world. So we're not, and he was an All Black. So we're not talking about, fringe players there. There's a Via Fafita, who plays number 8, another All Black, great player, really strong. And then Sports of Rugby in Scotland will recognise Sione Vilanu, who signed for Glasgow at the start of last season. It was a real breakthrough player for them. He's a really, really powerful back row player. Hands on the ball, works hard, and he's a kind of Glasgow really uncovered a star there. So he was on the bench last week. They're announcing the team later today. If he plays, that's a real interesting one because he'll be up against Matt Vegas and Jack Dempsey, who are his clubmates in the back row. So there's guys in there that could certainly cause problems.
Yeah, do you have a rough time for the Tonga squad announcement? Do you know when that'll be? Is it just late this afternoon?
I don't. Yeah, the press conference is at 5 o'clock, I think. Our time, so 4 o'clock your time. The teams come out. It seems to be a bit of a lottery. Certainly, the Six Nations time, they come out at lunchtime. It comes out at 12, so when it's coming, but we don't know that. So I would imagine it may be a wee bit before that, but it'll be later this afternoon, 4 o'clock at the latest. I would have thought UK time. Yeah,
stay tuned to the Herald. And we'll have content up from that throughout the day. I know there's loads of content in tomorrow's paper from the Rugby World Cup as well. So some really good stuff that is coming. I mean, we can't talk about really what score we need to get, but you look at the Ireland score, and then obviously the big one tomorrow night is Ireland v South Africa. What does Scotland want from that? Because there's so many permutations, and everything can change. And it's possible to predict the future, but we might as well try, David. I mean, what would the
Ireland South Africa game? Yeah.
What would be the optimum result from a Scotland perspective in that game?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe would a draw be good? I'm not sure. I think
I was thinking
it's
that.
funny. Yeah. I hate these things when you have to try. I mean, I'm terrible at maths. I kind of get myself mixed up. I mean, it was funny because we've asked every time, there's been a Scotland press conference this week, we've asked whoever it's been put in front of us, and we asked Gregor Townsend today, and he kind of smiled and said, "I know what I want, but I'm not telling you guys," which is fair enough. I think ideally, we want South Africa to win, them to kind of run away with the pool, and then at least we go into that last game against Ireland, and it's a winner takes all. And we don't have to worry too much about racking up a huge score against Romania and getting as much as we can out of Tonga. And it was an interesting thing. I was speaking to one of the English journalists who was covering it today, and his, as a Scot, you're always kind of, I'm kind of conscious that we certainly see it through tartan tinted glasses. But his view was, he said, I thought he was being polite to us. He said, I think you guys will beat Ireland. And the point was that all the pressure's on Ireland now. Everybody expecting Ireland are world number one. They're not really used to that. They've never got past the quarterfinal. They've not got a great World Cup record. So we're kind of used to the idea that we're going to go into this game having to win it, being under a bit of pressure. I think Ireland, the pressure will be on them. They'll have to go to it. So I think if South Africa beat Ireland tomorrow, A, it'll dent Ireland's confidence, and B, it puts a lot more pressure on them than us, or Scotland and Ireland if you're being a neutral journalist. So that would be my prediction, that that's what the players and the coaches at Scotland want. Certainly that's what I'll be rooting for.
There's no neutrality here. You want Scotland to do
exactly.
So hopefully the pressure ramps up in Ireland and they can't deal with it, and Scotland win that last game. But I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because everyone is kind of building up to that potential do or die game against Ireland. But there's 2 important games before then. It's important that Scotland respond. There was lots of good things, I suppose, in the opening game against South Africa, but there was certain things that didn't work well. I'm looking particularly at the line out. Obviously, that will change with injury. I mean, is that something an area where Scotland really needs to improve in?
Yeah, I think they should. I mean, it was interesting. To be under pressure with South Africa's rush defence, and that they're really ferocious in their breakdown, and so they actually kind of coped with that well. And maybe they spent so much time worrying about that. The line out, they weren't under much pressure, and it was really their own mistakes. So, I mean, really, it's just about tidying up. It's about being more accurate. So we'll see. We'll see. They certainly will have to be, if not against Tonga, they will have to be against Ireland, because you can't in international rugby. You can't afford, not to be winning your own ball. And you give Ireland the ball, they'll hold on to it for a long, long time, and then they'll score points, and it will just be a long afternoon or long evening. Sorry, it's an evening game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. 8 o'clock kick-off for that one tomorrow night. I'm up in Dundee, so I might have to stream it on my phone on the way home in the train.
Enjoy.
So no south of France for me. I'm getting sent to Dundee instead. So I know where I'd rather be, David. But in terms of players, I mean, there was no temptation from Gregor to kind of. You can't afford to rest players in a tournament. The possibility of getting injuries is always going to be there, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
we'll talk about at a point, but I mean, I know you don't want Finn Russell, our catalyst, our most important player, to pick an injury, but you can't supersede these things, can you?
No, I think that's it. I mean, rugby, there is a huge instance rate of injury, guys being out, so that it is a gamble. And you saw that last night. France racked up a huge win over Namibia, but their captain and probably the best player in the world, Antoine Dupont, got ahead to the cheek or jaw area, and it looks like he's majored out for the World Cup. Certainly, probably not going to play to the semi-finals if they get that far. But it does look a majored out. So that's the gamble. A lot of people saying, why the hell was Antoine Dupont playing against Namibia when you're winning 91-0? Was it 91-0, 96-0? Tonga got a different proposition. They're a better side. Finn Russell will want to play. He also had a pretty frustrating game against South Africa. So you think just for his kind of mental well-being and having him in a good place, he probably needs to get back on the horse, get out there and have one of the games that we know he can. So it's not a massive surprise that Gregor's gone down that route. He's spoken a lot about how letting players get themselves into form and stay in form's more important than the risk of injury.
Yeah, completely. I mean, on the point, you don't want to see the kind of best players in the tournament picking up an injury. There's probably more question marks over his involvement last night against Namibia. I can't even say that. Namibia. Yeah, it's difficult for me to say. There's probably more question marks over his involvement just due to the fact that France are probably going to go through anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Namibia are. Namibia are not as strong a team as Tonga. Tonga are a strong team. There's a good chance that. Did we cut out there?
No, I'm still good. Still good.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I think we may well see the likes of Finn Russell rested. Romania are the equivalent of Namibia, and it's a seeded pool. And I think there's a good chance a week out from Scotland playing Ireland that Finn Russell, or certainly 2 or 3 of those guys, the real frontliners, will be rested for that one. But this game against Tonga it is losable. Scotland shouldn't lose, but if they don't get it right, and if they mixed everything up, then they could find themselves in a bit of a sticky hole. That's the nightmare scenario. We talk about racking up a big score. That would be great. It'd be really useful, but losing it doesn't bear thinking about. So it's not comparable to Tonga and Namibia in terms of Scotland-France selections.
No, we won't even consider losing this game on Sunday. That would be disastrous, to say the least. Just from the Townsend press conference, I mean, what were the kind of main takeaways? Were anything particularly interesting that he had to say?
Not really. I mean, he spoke about the power of his bench or the strength of his bench. So that was that was interesting. I think I'm not really selling it, overselling it here. He challenged. He talked about the likes of Rory Sutherland and Chris Harris. How it's a big opportunity. These are guys that have been really important players for Scotland. They toured in the past. They toured with the Lions just 2 years ago, and they've fallen out. Not really because of anything they've done, but really because Pierre Schumann at loosehead prop has kind of burst onto the scene and really grabbed that jersey, and Hugh Jones has kind of returned from. So, he kind of challenged those guys. It's an interesting one. Rory Sutherland, who was the Lion, spoke a bit about how he's actually without a club now. He left Edinburgh, went down to Worcester Warriors, who are playing the English Premiership, who subsequently went bust. Ulster kind of offered him a short-term contract, so that kind of kept him going last year, but he wasn't kept on by Ulster. So, it's an amazing story. You've got this guy, and he spoke to us at the press conference, who was a British and Irish line 2 years ago, and is now, looking for a club. And he was very open about it, how it's been really difficult for his family, how he's desperate he would go anywhere. And, we talk about pressure. These guys are all under pressure because they can't afford to, but, here's a guy that's playing for his job, which, is quite a remarkable thing when you're at a World Cup and, with one of the fifth best team in the world. So that's quite an interesting sub-theme there, subplot there that Rory's under that kind of pressure.
Yeah, that's actually crazy when you think about it, isn't it? You imagine that in say football, for example, a player playing for the fifth best team in the world. The starting is probably going to be on 100 grand a week at a top club, and here in rugby, you've got a player who can't find them. So that's I'm sure he'll be
absolutely. And I should say he's a guy that's got value. I mean, the problem in rugby is that two Premiership clubs, we don't have, it's not as big a professional game, and 2 Premiership clubs went bust last year, 3 really, and all those guys have flooded the market, so there's budgets are tight, and part of it is that the season starts. He's going to miss the first couple of months of the season, so I think a lot of clubs will look at it and think, do we really want this guy who's going to miss the first couple of weeks of the season, first month of the season, then probably be away at the Six Nations again? So it's not that Rory doesn't have value; it's just that he's just found himself he's in an unfortunate position. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time, really.
Yeah, completely. Hopefully, he can put himself when he's in the shop window and put in a really good performance and get that club. Because, like you said, it's for his family and things like that as well. It has been a long time since the last Scotland game. I mean, what have the players been doing? Obviously, training. I know they've been training. I mean, they've also. I know Gregor gave them a little bit of downtime as well. I mean, what have they been doing to kind of keep fresh, but also kind of keep their eyes on the prize, essentially?
Yeah, well, I mean, they got 3 days off after the South Africa game, and that's the big mystery is what was going on there. That was when David Cherry ended up getting sent, having to come home with a concussion, having fallen on a step. So you could speculate whether it was it was in the evening after a day off. So it's all speculative. We don't know what happened there, but I think they did have a bit of a kind of let their hair down at that point. They get a day off today, funnily enough. So they were a whole load of them. Most of them were going. They've got these really. I would say over-the-top security in France with the team. These guys, marching around with guns and jackboots, and so they're getting taken to this this group's base where they get taught how the French high security service or whatever they're called operate. So it's just a kind of day out and see something different. They play a lot of golf. There's a few of them play a lot of golf. Kyle Steyn, the Fagerson brothers, they're big golfers. But it is quite interesting. The squad are staying in just outside Valbonne, which is kind of outside Antibes, which is outside Nice. They're right at they're right in the sticks. We had to get a train to Antibes this morning, and then it's a 45-minute taxi to find them. So they're quite isolated up there. And we did speak to Jamie Ritchie about that, and he kind of said, he kind of hinted that there may be a wee bit detached from the whole World Cup, buzz that's going on down here. And I think maybe that's they want to keep the guys focused. That it's a great facility they're in, so that there's obviously logic there. But I wonder from on the other side that you do see some of the other teams make a point of staying in the town and being part of the World Cup thing. So that's an interesting thing, and we'll see how that pan out. It's still another 3 weeks of this to go. Are they going to end up tearing each other apart because they've been stuck together in a hotel by themselves for so long? I'm not sure. They're a good group of guys, probably not, but they play a lot of golf. It's one thing I can tell you.
It's very interesting to see that, isn't it, David? Because it's I suppose the balance is not having them in the middle of a city and the beach and maybe the distractions that are there, because you can imagine you want negative headlines and you can imagine what they could be, but at the same time you don't want them too detached, which it seems it might be. So it's about finding that balance, and they are away for a long time, and if you've got 2 weeks between a game and you're not doing much other than training and seeing your hotel, it could be difficult for some players.
Yeah, it is. And I was quite surprised. I mean, he by no means was he wasn't complaining, but he did, and he kind of took that on, and he said that we work hard to make sure that we do keep ourselves. But it was interesting. He just said, we've seen the buzz on TV. We don't really get it. We're a wee bit out on a limb here. So, I think that's something that I think it's certainly Gregor Townsend's mindset is that he wants his guys to have everything they need to be protected, to not have to be dealing with nonsense, peripheral things that are going to distract them. And there's certainly logic to that. We'll find out as the tournament goes on. But there is history in the squad, that guys like Finn Russell and Stuart Hogg before he left, they got, they got themselves in trouble a couple of years ago because they went out for a drink after a game, and it wasn't breaking the rules, but it wasn't quite sanctioned. So there has been history of it seems to be that some of them do get a wee bit of cabin fever. And I suspect a lot of it will be to do with results. I think if they get a good result and play well on Sunday night, then the pressure will be off. They'll probably be enjoy themselves a bit more in their own company. But if it doesn't go as well, that's I'm not, even if they don't lose, but they don't they kind of scrape it more than they expect. Then the pressure comes on a wee bit, and they're kind of they're stuck in this hotel in the middle of nowhere. And it'll be interesting to see how the psychology how the psychology of that develops.
Yeah, completely. Big weekend, of course, at the Rugby World Cup, but we'll look at a couple of other games before we wrap things up for today, David. I mean, Argentina plays Samoa tonight, Georgia, Portugal tomorrow, England, Chile, also Scotland, Tonga. But I mean, the last three games of the weekend are the big three, aren't they? Let's not kid ourselves on. So you get South Africa v Ireland, obviously hugely important to Scotland's prospects as well. Scotland v Tonga, it's a 4:45 kickoff UK time. And then Sunday night, fantastic entertainment. Wales v Australia. That's another unbelievable game.
Yeah, that's going to be great fun because Australia are in big trouble. They lost to Fiji. Eddie Jones, the former England coach, he's an Australian former England coach who he's always enjoyed being this kind of antagonistic character, but he's kind of become a caricature of himself. He's niggling, battling with everybody. And he seems to have made a few bad decisions. He's left some big characters at home, presumably because he doesn't like any other big characters in the squad than himself. And he's under a bit of pressure. I've got to say, I'm not a fan. I'm really hoping that Wales, I've been as a Scotland rugby, following Scotland for years. Wales have caused us a lot of heartache, but I'll still be rooting for them purely because I'm not a fan of Eddie Jones's, if I'm being brutally honest. But it'll be it's two teams that really could win, and whoever wins, if Wales win that, we were talking about it this morning. Then they probably end up playing Argentina. They win the pool. They play Argentina, who are not playing well. They played really badly against England in the quarterfinals. And then somehow this Wales team, who've lost, their kind of core of guys that were, kind of led them for years, been pretty disastrous, really. Loads of problems in the club game down there. They got Argentina in the quarters, and then they're into the semi-finals of a World Cup, and who knows what's happens. So, from a Scottish perspective, it sticks in the throat a wee bit, isn't it? Because we've got to try and get to a pool that contains number one in the world, Ireland, number two, and world champions, South Africa. And if you manage that, then you face France or New Zealand. So the draw is crazy. We've talked about that before. But the Wales-Australia game should be brilliant, and the South Africa-Ireland game. I mean, that deserves to be a World Cup final in itself. So huge games. It's whether you're a rugby fan or not, I think it's great entertainment because it's top athletes at the top of their game, going hard at it with a lot at stake.
Yeah, three massive games, isn't it? Obviously, the weekend. So some fantastic entertainment. I watched that Eddie Jones. He done the kind of impromptu press conference at the airport when he started rounding on the journalists. It was typical Eddie Jones box office. I suppose he is box office in rugby, isn't he? I mean, he does draw eyes. I mean, he's a very divisive character.
Well, I think it's pantomime, isn't it? I say I hate him, but from a journalist's point of view, it's great fun. It gives you something to write about. And I think he plays the character. You love to hate him, don't you? He is box office, but I would like to see. I hope Wales do, and I'd like to see how he reacts if they do, because it should be quite funny.
Yeah, that would be a shootout, wouldn't it? Essentially,
it would be. Yeah,
So that one's at 8 o'clock on Sunday night, but our attention, of course, will be on Scotland Sunday, 4:45 kickoff UK time. We'll be back with Alistair. I think what did David Alistair?
I think that's the plan. Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, we'll be back live with Alistair pre-match, looking ahead to that game in more detail. And David and Alistair will have some great content on the website across the coming days ahead of that game. But I mean, thanks very much for joining us today, David, and thanks for everyone who has tuned in. We'll be back on Sunday evening and again on Monday with these live videos. We'll continue them throughout the World Cup and beyond. So, guys, thanks very much for joining us, and especially to David in France. Enjoy the heat.
I'll do my best. We swim in the Mediterranean after I finish my copy. So
there we go. Enjoy. Thank you again. Take care, David.
Cheers.